I had been driving for the last 2 hours, heading to the Marriott Hotel in Baltimore. My wife was there for a conference, and I was going to surprise her by stopping by and taking her out to dinner. You think I'm overflowing with love and affection for my spouse? Not at all. For the past 3 months, I suspected that my wife was having affairs on the side with one of her coworkers. I had a gut feeling that every time she went on another business trip, training, or conference, she was actually sleeping with someone. So tonight, I was going to catch her in the act and end it once and for all. A little backstory. My wife, Megan, and I have been married for 14 years now, and we have 2 wonderful children, 12-year-old Sarah and 10-year-old Todd. Before today's meeting, I dropped them off at my mom's house, and they are currently at her house. Megan and I got married right out of high school. She and I dated for the last 2 years of high school, and this bonding was a natural prologue to our marriage. Young Megan was a spectacular girl, and in her personality always cheerful. She was slender, wore long hair of a brown shade, and was characterized by unusual in its chiseled expressiveness of facial features. Megan's figure even now looks so flawless that not a single extra gram of fat can be found in it. In general, I always thought we had a strong and loving marriage, until about 3 months ago when I began to suspect that something was going wrong. At first, it was some little things that I couldn't understand or explain. I didn't want to pester Megan with questions about it, much less confront her about it, because I was afraid of seeming somehow paranoid or jealous. The location of her work seminar today was set close enough that I could swoop in unexpectedly and possibly catch the harlot right in the act. I grabbed my business briefcase from the car and approached the receptionist in the hotel lobby. "Hi, I'm Phil Jenkins." I smiled briefly and introduced myself at the front desk in business style. "My wife Megan is here for an insurance conference and informed me that she was staying in room 214. She said I could get my key here." After tapping on the computer keyboard and checking the records, the clerk nodded and turned around to take the right key. "May I see your ID, please?" he asked before handing it to me. "No problem. Good of you to ask," I complimented, pulling out and showing my driver's license. So the key was received and clutched firmly in my fist, but I was nervous as hell as I walked to the elevator. All sorts of thoughts arose and bounced chaotically around in my head. What will I do when I catch her? What will I tell her? To both of them? What should I do when I get to the room door? Knock or just barge in? What if besides the lock the door is locked with a safety chain? Hell, what if Megan's in there alone? And would she even be in the room? Exiting the elevator and already walking down the hallway, I decided to just put the key in the lock and try to open the door. See what would come out of it. I tried to be as quiet as possible, literally advancing the key in the lock 1 millimeter at a time and barely audibly unlocking the door. I cautiously opened it, to find Megan sitting half-turned toward me at the desk with her open briefcase and doing paperwork. Apparently sensing something, she abruptly turned around and jumped up in her chair, shrieking in surprise and clasping her hands to her chest. "Damn it, Phil, you scared the hell out of me! What the hell are you doing here?" she exclaimed, gasping with fright mixed with irritation. "Hello, darling. I had some free time, so I thought I'd drop by and invite you to dinner," I said, my main version of the story justifying my unexpected visit. "Great. You're staying the night, aren't you? I'm sure I could use a little company." Megan, who had recovered from her daze, stepped closer and kissed me soundly. Well, it looked like my grand plan to catch my cheating wife had fallen apart and failed miserably. "Do we have time to fool around for a quickie before we go to dinner?" I asked, hopefully. "Hey, I need to shower first, but I'll tell you what." She put her fists on my waist and tilted her head to the side. "How about a quickie before I rinse off? After we get back from dinner, we'll have all night to do whatever you want," she purred playfully. Megan quickly undressed and threw her clothes on the floor. With a wide grin on her face, she easily got up from her knees, turned around, and headed to the bathroom to take a shower. I took advantage of the respite to clean myself up and collapsed onto the bed. Looking around, I noticed that Megan's makeup bag was on the dresser against the wall. I got out of bed and went over to see if she had any aspirin to get rid of the headache that throbbed in my temples from the tiring drive. I didn't find any pills, or I just didn't get to them in time, because my eye caught something odd in the side pocket of her purse. I stuck my hand in there and pulled out a 6-pack of condoms. Holding them in my hand and staring at them dumbfounded, I took a few steps backward and collapsed back onto the bed. The thing was, after Todd was born, Megan had started taking birth control pills. They made her sick all the time, so we decided that I would get a vasectomy. We haven't needed to use any birth control since. It was nice to be rid of any problems and concerns with condoms and the pill. Naturally, now I immediately had a valid question. What the fuck are those rubber bands doing in her makeup bag, and even in such quantity? Well, I am not a fool and quickly came to the conclusion that my wonderful wife is really cheating on me. The pain that was tormenting my head seemed to be even worse with this news, so I did not immediately realize what I should do with this knowledge. But one thought that seemed to make sense to me did occur to me. Digging a little more into Megan's surprisingly ample purse, I found a couple of English pins that she kept for emergencies with her clothes. Taking one of the pins, I carefully made almost imperceptible holes in the middle of each of the condom packages. Then I put both the pins and the condoms back where I'd found them. She was still fiddling in the shower, seemingly even humming something through the sound of the water, so I picked up my cell phone and called a friend's house. "Freddie, it's Phil. Yeah, hi, I need you to do me a favor." "No problem, what do you need me to do?" he answered. "Wait about an hour from now, then call me on my cell phone and tell me that the school has a burst pipe and they need me as soon as possible. Really, though, all you have to do is just call and the rest is my concern." "Understood, buddy." Fred confirmed his involvement without too many questions. "Then I'll call you around 7. See you then, buddy." I thought about it for a while and decided that I didn't really want to spend the night with my wife. Now I was already feeling sorry for what Megan and I had done just a few minutes ago, and I didn't want to add anything loving to it. On the way home, I would be able to think hard about my situation and next steps. I knew I would have to do something, but at that moment, I couldn't think of what. When Megan finally got out of the shower, the most important thing for me was to hold back and not have a fight with her right there in the room. It was a difficult task, because I was seething inside, and the only thing I wanted to do was to hurt this woman who was my wife as much as she had condemned me to. Frankly, I am not a violent man. I never lose my temper and try to remain calm in any situation. Besides, on mature reflection, I decided that it would be better for me if I did not let her know that I knew anything about her infidelity, and yet still, by the time we got to the hotel restaurant, I was utterly mortified by her betrayal. "Order whatever you want, honey. I can pay for it," I offered Megan as nonchalantly as I could. "Well, I'm not that hungry," she said uncertainly as she studied the menu. "I think I'll just have the small filet." "That sounds good to me, too," I agreed. "How about adding a bottle of pink wine to the order?" After the waiter took my order, I couldn't help myself. I had to probe a bit, asking a couple of seemingly innocent questions. "Megan, are you happy with the way our marriage is going?" I began, playing with my fork and knife with my fingertips. "Of course I am," she replied confidently. "I have a beautiful home, 2 wonderful children, and a loving husband. What more could I want?" "Oh, I don't know. I guess sometimes I just wonder if I'm doing everything I can to make you happy. I'm so lucky to have such an amazing wife. Sometimes I have to pinch myself to believe it's true." I had to put a smile on my face. "Oh, you silly man," Megan cooed with an elusive tenderness in her voice. "Is that why you came all this way to see me?" "Well, honey, I don't think you have anything to worry about. I'm perfectly happy and content, and you, for your part, are doing the right thing. I couldn't wish for a better husband than you." The waiter brought our orders, and Megan and I spent the entire dinner making small talk about nothing. Just as the plates were being put away, my cell phone rang, the call I'd been waiting for. Apologizing to Megan, I walked out of the dining room and into the lobby so as not to disturb the other diners. Holding the phone to my ear, I waited a few minutes and went back out. "That was Freddie," I informed my wife as she looked at me questioningly. "The water main at school has burst, and I honestly need to get back there as soon as possible. I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to cancel our night together." There was a look of disappointment on Megan's face, and at that moment I couldn't tell if it was real or not. For her immediate future, though, it didn't matter whether I stayed or left. Either way, she would answer for betraying my trust. As we entered the elevator, Kirk Langford was just getting out. He was the business partner Megan always seemed to be traveling with. "Oh, hey, Megan." He slowed down. "I went to your room to see if you wanted to have dinner, but no one answered my knock. I can see why now." He held out his hand to me and introduced himself. "Kirk Langford, and you must be Phil. Megan talks about you all the time." "Phil came to stay with me for the night," Megan explained. "But there's been an emergency and he'll have to come back. I guess I'll have to sleep alone again tonight," she said with a sigh. It wasn't easy to shake hands with this wife's co-worker and put a nice smile on her face. As my wife and I rode up in the elevator, I had to bring up a topic that had been bugging me again. "Megan, I'd really like you to leave your job, and I'd feel better if you didn't work with Kirk. We've discussed this before, and it's important to me," I emphasized. "Phil, I've already told you I'm not quitting my job," she replied with a tinge of distaste in her voice. "I love what I do, and I'm learning a lot from Kirk. What you really need to do is get over your paranoia about me and Kirk." We made the rest of the way back to the room in silence. I picked up my unopened bags, and after a quick, sloppy kiss, I headed home. All the way back, I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that Kirk would definitely stop by Megan's room right after dinner. What they were going to do next, I didn't want to imagine because of the anger in me. Anyway, by the time I got home, I felt wrecked, and my mind was completely frazzled. And my head ached again, almost more than before. By evening, I began to hate my wife for what she was doing to me. I wish I could be one of those resourceful guys who can think of all those clever ways to catch their cheating wives, but I was in a kind of stunned stupor. What were some of the real actions I could take with what I had discovered in Baltimore? I couldn't even think of a plausible enough reason to refuse to have sex with her. What I really wanted was a divorce, and the sooner the better, but, again, I didn't have strong enough evidence of Megan's infidelity that I could present to her, much less in court. I felt defeated, for my wife was cheating on me and I knew it and there was nothing I could do about it. I wasn't going to put up with it, but I needed outside help. Megan came home 2 days later, beaming with a happy smile like a schoolgirl who got 3 straight A's. I could see that she'd had a great time at the conference, and on the sidelines apparently, and that made me even angrier. I furtively checked her purse, and there was only 1 condom left in the now familiar inside pocket of the entire package. And yes, it still had the puncture I'd made, unnoticeable to the uninformed eye. Sex with Megan that night was more of a routine than the pleasure it had been before. Saturday was the traditional picnic of Globus Insurance, the insurance company where my wife worked. At least the kids had something to do. As for me, I was not looking forward to the day. I couldn't escape the idea that some of the employees of the company knew what was going on, and in a way I felt like a cuckold. A very uncomfortable and unpleasant feeling, let me tell you. My imagination painted pictures of people around me, casting smirking glances at me and glancing at each other with a meaningful look. It's quite possible that none of this actually happened, but I still tried to keep a low profile so as not to become the object of rude jokes. Sure, you could say I was a little paranoid, but I couldn't help it. Unlike me, Megan was really enjoying herself, having fun interacting with all the invitees and especially Kirk. They didn't show their close affection outwardly, but they were definitely quite friendly in their interactions with each other. Both of them ignored me, though, which was fine with me right now. "Hi, I'm Janet Langford, and you must be Phil Jenkins," came a woman's voice from somewhere behind and to the side. I turned around and she was stunning. At that moment, I was truly stunned. Up until that moment, I had thought my wife looked gorgeous, but Janet Langford was the living embodiment of a flamboyant pin-up beauty from a magazine spread. Her head was adorned with long brown hair, and her face was magnetized by big blue eyes. Janet's figure was striking in its perfect proportions, even though she was small in stature. The million-dollar question: why would Kirk Langford cheat on such a beautiful woman? "Oh, I'm sorry," I said, feeling myself blushing. You caught me daydreaming. Hi. Yeah, I'm Phil. Nice to meet you. We can go somewhere and talk. Preferably someplace where there aren't any kids or noisy people around, she asked, casting a concerned look in the direction of the busy crowd. Sure, let's walk along the lake, I suggested eagerly. It seemed like no one here would miss me. Me neither, she said with a casual wave of her hand. About 100 meters away from the picnic area, there were a few nice benches with a scenic view of the lake in relative seclusion. We settled down on one of them. I'm all ears. What would you like to talk about? I asked her, interrupting a brief pause. Janet seemed to be in a quandary, hesitating to answer. It's difficult for me. I don't know how best to tell you, she corrected herself. You about it. Let's just say it's a very delicate subject. At that moment, I realized that she knew. It made our conversation easier, so I decided to make it easier for her. You mean the affair between Kirk and my wife? I bluntly voiced this equation that was treacherous to both of us. I only found out about it this week. Upon hearing my confession, Janet seemed visibly relieved and shared her own information with me. I've known about it for about 2 months now, she said. I'm getting ready to file for divorce now, but I need a little help. I hired a detective to get me proof of his infidelity, but my lawyer said I'd have a much better chance of winning if Megan agreed to testify, or at least sign a notarized note, or at least sign a notarized statement attesting to their intimacy. What do you mean, evidence? I thought I'd clarify that important question. I have photographs and phone records. The detective hasn't been able to get any videotapes yet, but the photos are pretty good as evidence. I also have a list of dates and times of their dates. She puckered her beautiful, sensual lips in disgust at the last word. I can try to help, I offered, encouraged that I wouldn't have to fight this alone. I'm not sure exactly how yet, but I'll try to work on it. Do you think your lawyer could help me with my divorce papers too, using some of the evidence you've gathered? I'd really appreciate it because right now I don't have any evidence at all. Janet nodded in agreement and continued. Besides, I'm going to sue Globus. I already have several statements from employees who confirm that some of the company's executives knew about the affair, but did nothing to stop it. My lawyer is going to put these bigwigs in front of a choice. Fire them both or face $1 million lawsuit. Wow, I whistled, admiring her determination. All I can say is that I'm certainly impressed. Kirk is playing golf tomorrow morning. Will you be able to come to my house around noon? She asked, her piercing blue eyes fixed on me. How could I refuse such an offer? He won't be gone until later in the evening. I'll show you what I have and we can decide together what our future strategy will be. I live at 206 Hemlock Avenue. That's in Crestmont. Okay, it's a date. Sorry. Not really a date, but, you know what I mean. I was embarrassed, but Janet smiled, slapping me lightly on the arm, and we both laughed. Now I felt more comfortable than ever around this stunningly beautiful woman. After making an appointment, we walked back to the picnic area. As I said, no one had missed us during our absence, and not a single soul had missed us. I felt a lot better now, though. Maybe this whole damn mess in my life would be over soon. At least I really hope so. As I expected, the next morning, Megan announced to me that she had some shopping to do and would be gone for a couple hours. After she left, I dropped the kids off at my mom's house and headed to Crestmont. Janet met me at the door and we walked to the home office. There was a beautiful leather couch and a large computer monitor on the desk in front of it. On the screen was an image of an empty motel room. She gestured for me to sit down. I have beer, soda, and wine. What would you like? She asked as I made myself comfortable on the couch. A regular soda would be fine, or a Pepsi if you have one. When she returned with a cold can and handed me the soda, I remarked, thanking her. So I'm all ears, Janet. Do me a favor and tell me what's going on. Well, in a few minutes we're going to see my dear husband play golf, live, and in the most colorful format, she replied in a voice full of sarcasm. I hope you don't get too upset, but I think you'll recognize his caddy. How the hell did you set that up? I marveled, opening my soda. It cost me $1,400 to set all this up, and I really hope it was worth it. The money I spent was charged to Kirk's card, though, but he doesn't know it. Janet grinned and then continued. I expect this will last about 2 hours, so make yourself comfortable, she suggested. Besides drinks, I've got some popcorn and nachos to help us pass the time. By the way, I'm getting a DVD of the whole session, and I'd love to share a copy with you. Actually, I don't really want to watch this spectacle, I sourly grumbled. But on the other hand, I wouldn't miss it for the world. Weird, huh? Okay, let the show begin. For the next 20 minutes, while nothing interesting was happening on the screen, Janet and I chatted for a while. She showed me the information she had gathered about this office affair, and I was really amazed at the amount of photos, videos, and documents she had. But at the same time, morally, I was crushed because I now knew exactly what Megan had been doing, when, and how. I was surprised to learn that the Langfords have 3 large koi ponds in their backyard. In our conversation, I expressed the hope that I would have the opportunity to admire them and asked Janet if I could bring the children to her sometime for that purpose. She seemed flattered and delighted at my earnest interest and said she would gladly invite them to visit. About that time, some action started on the monitor, and we had to interrupt. Just as Janet had predicted, Kirk and Megan entered the room and, without wasting any time, immediately began to undress. There was no small talk or even foreplay between the lovers. They just threw off their clothes and jumped on the bed. The transmitted image was excellent, but the sound was a little distorted. It didn't matter much, though, because the main evidence was a clear and unambiguous picture of lewd adultery. I think you'll understand that I felt a little uncomfortable sitting on the couch next to a complete stranger and watching my wife and her husband having passionate sex. Wow, you don't see that very often, Janet interrupted our strained silence, commenting on what we had seen on the screen. I smiled embarrassedly, not knowing what to say in response. In fact, I was not the best conversationalist, and the action that was unfolding on the monitor in front of our eyes disgusted me, to say the least. They started in the traditional 69 position with Megan on top. The angle of the hidden camera prevented us from getting a better view of what was happening, but there was no doubt what they were doing. I had to admit that they were acting like a perfectly cooperative and coherent team, and from the looks of it, they were having a lot of fun together. Their bodies were moving faster and faster as they approached the finish line. Janet, I hate to interrupt the show, but do we have to watch this? I turned away from the screen and addressed the lady of the house. I guess this is something you don't want to see, she said sympathetically. That's right, I agreed with her. To be honest, it's not the most pleasant thing to watch my wife having sex with another man. Especially since I feel a little bit like I'm having sex with another man. Especially since I feel a little uncomfortable with you sitting next to me. Well, it's all automatically recorded, she waved her hand. And thanks to those recordings, we'll have all the evidence we need for the lawyers. We don't have to look any further than that, and I can't say I got any pleasure out of this movie either. Anyway, the plot seems pretty predictable. What now, Phil? Are you going home or what? Janet asked. I was actually hoping you'd show me your koi ponds. I think they'd be much more interesting to watch than 2 hours of sweaty puffing. Janet's eyes seemed to light up with excitement, just from the fact that I showed interest in her favorite hobby. She jumped up from the couch, and as we walked to the back of the house, I could hear Megan squealing from the video, apparently having reached another orgasm. As we stepped out into the fresh air, I couldn't escape the thought that I was in for a more enjoyable time than my wife. Janet's 3 ornamental fish ponds were truly marvelous. I was particularly interested in the intricate pumping and water filtration systems, having worked as a plumber for some time before taking a job at the school. According to Janet, Kirk didn't help with her hobby at all, and she had to find and hire people herself for all the work required with laying pipes and installing pumps. Upon hearing this, of course, I offered to come over and help her anytime Kirk went off to play his favorite golf. Honestly, I wasn't trying to hit on Janet. I just wanted to learn more about the carp ponds. However, spending more time with this spectacular woman was an added nice bonus for me. Only after a few hours, which seemed to fly by too quickly, did we go back inside. The picture on the monitor showed that the motel room was already empty, so we decided it was time for me to head home too. Janet promised to call me when Kirk had another round of golf, so I could visit her again, with Sarah and Todd. The next few weeks were difficult. Every time Megan showered, I checked her purse. Just amazingly, there was always a new supply of condoms in the hidden pocket. I couldn't figure out when she had time to use them all. I hooked a temporarily expropriated English pin on my keychain and used it every so often to methodically poke holes in the condoms she'd prepared while waiting for Megan to suddenly want to pay her sister a visit. In the days when Kirk was off hitting white balls on the greens, in the evenings our children would go on and on telling Megan about their visits to the lady who has many, many koi. But she never seemed to take any interest in their tales. Sarah and Todd showed her pictures of the fish they'd drawn themselves and talked about the names they'd called them. But Megan never made the connection between Kirk's wife and the koi owner. She seemed relieved that I could keep the kids occupied while she slept with her sex maestro. I made 2 more attempts to convince her to quit her job and stop seeing Kirk. Both times I got the same rejection, and the second one was disgusting in its form. Among other things, I had to make up all sorts of excuses not to have sex with her, to which Megan responded with several scathing barbs about my manhood. Her derogatory epithets hurt my self-esteem a bit, but it made it easier to justify all the actions I've been taking lately. Tuesday night, she finally dropped the expected bombshell. "Phil, I've been feeling overly stressed lately. I'm going to take a few days off from work and go visit my sister for, I think, about a week. What do you say you could watch the kids while I recover a bit?" "Hey, I totally understand," I responded immediately. "You work a lot of overtime and stay in the office late. So yes, I think it would be good for you to relax and rest. A trip to your sister's house is much better than a whole year of psychiatrist sessions and also much cheaper. You go and have a good time, and I'll take care of everything," I told her. "Oh, I'm so glad you understand." Megan's voice was oozing with honey. "All this overtime is necessary for the good of our family, but I think I've been working a little too much." I had trouble sleeping that night. My thoughts kept revolving around what I had to do the next day. What I was really glad about was that it was finally time to take action. Megan's sister, Nancy, and her husband, Brad, lived about 3 hours away. Brad was basically a nice guy, but alas, a complete tosser. If Nancy said jump, Brad would jump without hesitation. The best part was that there were 2 abortion clinics in the town where they lived. Of course, I had prepared myself for the expected development, and I already had the names, addresses, and hours of operation of both clinics. I even familiarized myself with the terms of the agreements that were required for women to be served at each. Both clinics required a 2-day preparation period before the abortion for the patient to be examined and various tests to be taken. This meant that the closest date Megan could make an appointment for the procedure was Friday, assuming her first appointment was on Wednesday. I decided that Megan would try to get it done as soon as possible so that she would have a few days to recover before returning home. That left me with a day and a half to plan my own course of action. No problem. After Megan left to rest and recuperate her fallen strength, I began to organize my own affairs. I had to explain to my parents what was going on. It was hard to admit that my marriage had failed, but my dad and mom understood and supported me. The kids were happy to stay with them for a visit, and Dad's pickup truck would come in handy for hauling Megan's stuff. I called my attorney, who informed me that he had already prepared all the necessary paperwork so I could pick it up Thursday morning. Janet's papers were also fully prepared, and she had arranged for Kirk to be served at the same time Megan received her divorce papers. The only problem with my plan was that I felt I had to give Megan one last chance to make things right. I didn't hold out much hope for that, though. The rest of the day, Dad and I were busy packing and packing Megan's things. Thursday morning, after 3 hours of driving, I arrived at the first clinic. It was closed. There was only one left, called Planned Parenthood. I approached the receptionist with the most confident look I could muster. "Good morning, my name is Phil Jenkins. My wife Megan said I should come in and sign a consent form." "What kind of form is that?" The lady looked at me blankly. "I'm sorry, I don't know the exact name of it, but as far as I can tell, it's a form that says I understand everything that's going on with my wife, agree to it, and won't sue, or anything like that," I explained. "Wait a minute. The lady ran her fingers over the computer keyboard and then stared at the monitor. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. That was Megan Jenkins, right? Yes, that's right. Do you need my ID or anything else? I asked, beaming with eagerness to show my driver's license. She shook her head in the negative and clicked the mouse for a few more seconds, checking my wife's information. Her sister had already signed for her, but your signature would really be better. Wait a minute. I'll get her file. Bingo! Now I just had to get through the next couple minutes. The admin lady put the form in front of me and asked me to sign just below the signature left by Nancy. I noticed that the procedure itself had already been scheduled for 11 o'clock Friday morning, and they had to be at the clinic an hour early. Do we have to pay anything else for this? I asked, pulling my checkbook out of my inside pocket and placing it on the counter. No, your wife has already paid the full amount, $800 in cash. There's nothing else to pay at this time, she informed me. Thank you very much. I appreciate your help. It makes things a lot easier. I thanked the nice lady, and then I left the clinic with a light heart. You would not believe the overwhelming welcome I received when I arrived at Nancy and Nancy's house, totally unexpectedly for both sisters. I arrived at Nancy and Brad's house. The emotion fountained so falsely that it was actually kind of funny, and I could hardly contain myself from giving myself away. Megan started with this. Phil, what a wonderful surprise. What are you doing here? Well, Mom and Dad wanted to take the kids to their house for a few days, so I took a sick day and decided to stop by and see you guys. I guess you could say that I, like you, sweetie, need to unwind a little too, I said with a completely simple-minded look. There was a sudden surprised silence in the room at this news. I could see them start to look at each other, and probably all of them had gears turning at full speed in their heads. I had put them in a predicament, and now they had to get out of it somehow. I noticed Nancy get up from her seat and nodded to Brad, inviting him to join her in the kitchen. With a strained smile at me, she hurried out of the room, and Brad rushed after his wife. While they conferred there in the kitchen, Megan kept me busy making small talk and chirping about nothing in particular. A few minutes later, Brad returned to the room alone. Phil, I've got a great idea, he blurted out with a show of enthusiasm. Tomorrow I can get off work and borrow a boat from my buddy Jack. We can get out of here early and spend the day on the lake. The fishing's great, and sometimes you get bass like that. Brad swung his arms out to the sides like a true fisherman. Plus, this way we don't disturb the ladies. How about it, buddy? He stared at me with a bit of anxious anticipation. Sounds like fun, Brad. A quiet day at the lake would take all my worries away. Done. By the way, see if Jack can come with us, will you? I will. I'll make arrangements, Brad promised, satisfied that he had successfully completed the task he had received from Nancy. All in all three of us were clearly relieved at the way things had turned out. We had a serene dinner and spent the rest of the evening talking about nothing. Sex was out of the question that night, of course, because Megan didn't want her sister to hear any naughty noises. The next morning, which was clear and sunny, Jack showed up bright and early in the morning in his pickup truck with the trailer that held the boat. Brad was in the kitchen preparing lunch while filling a thermos bag with beer. We chatted for a while we loaded the back of the truck and the boat with provisions and fishing gear. Why are you stuck out there? Brad's voice came from the back of the truck as I lingered at the open passenger door. Come on, hop in and let's go. The fish won't catch themselves. No, Brad, I've decided not to go, I told him. I suggest you and Jack get some rest tonight, because I don't think you want to see Nancy for the next few hours. Brad argued with me for another 5 minutes about whether or not I should go with them before I finally had to give him a hard time. After a couple well-chosen swear words and a few physical threats, Jack and Brad spit and left. I, on the other hand, went back inside and poured myself a cup of coffee. After a little searching, I soon located Nancy's cell phone and turned it off. Then I picked up the landline and dialed my father's number. He was always up early, so Dad and I talked for about 2 hours. During our conversation, the incoming call waiting signal on the phone lit up about 6 times. It must have been Brad trying in vain to reach Nancy the whole time. He never succeeded, and finally gave up. Then I heard some sounds coming from upstairs. Apparently it was Nancy and Megan waking up and getting up. So I said goodbye to my dad and prepared for the inevitable fireworks. I cleared the home phone answering machine of Brad's missed calls and turned Nancy's cell phone back on. In less than 2 hours, both sisters were due at Planned Parenthood. I, on the other hand, was already less than 5 minutes away from coming face to face with two angry and hissing cats. Well, I was ready. The guys and I had already blown out the first pot of coffee from the morning, so I poured and put in a new one for my loving wife and her sister companion coming down the stairs. "Phil, what the hell are you doing here?" Megan shrieked, stopping abruptly at the kitchen doorway. "I didn't feel like fishing all day," I said, shrugging. "So I thought I'd just hang out with you girls today. I was thinking that we could go somewhere cozy and have lunch together." "Eh? How's that sound? I have to be on my way home by tonight, so I didn't want to spend all day with Brad and Jack in that stinking boat." "No, no, no way!" they yelled. But then they quickly looked at each other and Megan took the floor. "Nancy and I have plans tonight, and we'd rather go into town alone. I mean, I can go anywhere, anytime with you, but Nancy and I only see each other a couple times a year." "Heck, you'll be here all week, Megan," I countered. "I think you can at least give me half a day since I've come all this way. You'll have the rest of the week to do your girl stuff with your sister." Nancy grabbed her cell phone and hurried out of the kitchen, hastily hitting the speed dial button on the way. Megan, on the other hand, collapsed ass down on the nearest kitchen chair, squirming as if a truck had just slammed into her spoon. Even through several walls, we could hear Nancy yelling at poor Brad on the phone like he'd just committed the crime of the century. I felt sorry for the guy, but he married her with his eyes open. "Phil, I don't want to fight about this, but Nancy and I really don't want you following us around today. We have a whole day planned out, and you don't fit in at all," Megan said angrily, her voice sounding like a storm front approaching. Okay, I held up my hands. "Tell me what your plans are for today, and then I'll decide what to do. If I don't like it, I'll do something else. And I still don't see what the problem is since you've got a whole week ahead of you here and I've only got today. Listen, do you girls happen to be dating a couple guys?" I threw in a suggestion, as if in jest. "Hell no, we're not dating any guys." Megan started to boil over. "We just wanted to go shopping and maybe buy a few intimate things. Bras and panties and sexy nightgowns. And we don't really want you hanging around and ogling all that stuff and us as we try it on." "Well, most of these stores are in the mall, so I can do other things while you're in the fitting rooms," I said nonchalantly, not intending to make things any easier for the two conspirators. "We'll go to the center together, and there I'll do my own thing and won't bother you. Seriously, girls, you won't have to worry about entertaining me. And when it's time for lunch, I'll take you somewhere fancy to make up for any inconvenience I might have caused," I suggested, shifting my innocent eyes from Megan to her sister, who had reappeared in the kitchen. Nancy stood in the doorway, pouring bile and glaring fiercely at me. Still, she didn't say a word, apparently waiting for Megan's decision. My wife realized she was not going to change my mind and seemed ready to give up. Finally, Megan, after playing with her jowls for a few seconds, stood up abruptly and dropped it. "I need to go get dressed," since they were both still in their house robes. As she left the kitchen with a brisk stride, Nancy looked back at me, barely able to stand in the doorway. You're a real boring asshole, you know that?" She spat in my direction. She turned and followed Megan upstairs, and a wide, satisfied smile spread across my face. After about 20 minutes of mumbling and creaking on the bedroom floor, the call button on the house phone lit up. Obviously, someone upstairs was calling someone. The clock was ticking. They had an hour left to get to the center. I tried to calculate what my next move should be. If they tried to sneak out of the house without me, I'd just follow them and make sure they knew about it. I didn't think they'd pull that stunt, though. And so, 20 minutes later, they both came down the stairs. "Okay, Phil, let's go shopping. We're ready to go," Megan announced as if nothing had happened. This was a little easier than I thought it would be. The call upstairs that I had witnessed must have been to Planned Parenthood, and I bet they had agreed to reschedule the clinic visit for another time. Since I mentioned in my conversation with them that I was heading home this evening, they probably decided that the best way to handle the problem was to just wait until I left. I wasn't trying to stop Megan from getting an abortion. but I wanted to make it harder for her. When the three of us left the house, I insisted on taking my car because I wanted to drive myself. I didn't want those bitches to leave me somewhere along the road and run off. After driving a few miles from Nancy's house, I pulled into the nearest service station I could find. In a leisurely and methodical manner, I filled up the tank, checked the oil and water levels, and wiped the windshield thoroughly. It was the longest time I had ever spent in my conscious driving life servicing my car. All the while, I kept glancing at the sisters squirming in their seats. They were seething with anger. So my plan was working and in the best possible way. When we got to the mall, I parked farther away so we could walk around properly. Once our little group was inside the mall, I pretty much left them alone. Even though I kept an eye on them from afar, I didn't care at all what they were doing or what they were buying. They didn't seem to be having any fun. They spent most of their time talking emotionally and gesticulating nervously. The conspirators did buy a few things, though, just to show me that they were shopping. I tried to stay in the shadows, but at the same time, not let them out of my sight. Definitely the heated discussion between the sisters was about something serious. As we maneuvered through the mall, the clinic appointment time had passed, so I had managed to briefly delay the inevitable. Of course, I realized that Megan was going to have the procedure anyway, so I wasn't going to interfere with things any further. Shortly after noon, Nancy and Megan returned to the center courtyard of the mall, where I had made an appointment for them to meet at the end of their shopping spree. We had lunch at a cute little restaurant called Olive Garden and got home around 2 p.m. There wasn't much conversation on the way home and during lunch as well. I tried to hold back but smiled to myself the whole time. I knew those two bitches hated me right now, but I didn't BSO care. What a wonderful feeling. After lunch, I grabbed a couple beers from the fridge and relaxed on the couch. Soon, Brad finally came home from his fishing trip and was immediately subjected to a verbal and profanity bombardment from Nancy that lasted at least half an hour. Unable to withstand such an aggressive attack, Brad struggled to slip out the door and disappeared for a couple hours. He came back for dinner. When I saw him, I thought for a second that the poor guy's face had flattened a little and his ears had curled into tubes after his unequal verbal battle with his wife. But perhaps, in the twilight, I only imagined that. After the girls finished with the dishes, I asked Brad and Nancy if Megan and I could talk privately in the kitchen. Nancy gave me one of her mocking smirks, and they both retired to the living room. I could tell by the look on Megan's face that she was still upset about what had happened that day, and in that state of mind, it wasn't going to be easy for me to connect with her. First of all, Megan, I'd like to ask you one more time. Would you please, I emphasized insistently, quit your job and stop seeing Kirk Langford? Her cheekbones tensed as Megan clenched her jaw, seemingly just barely able to keep from punching me. God damn it! I don't want to hear that shit ever again, she hissed through gritted teeth. I'm tired of you talking about it all the time, and I'm not going to waste any more of my time answering your stupid questions. You already know the answer. It's the same as it's always been, and that's not going to change. Now either change the record or get the hell out of here. She threw an irritated glare at me. Not surprised, I reached for the bulky manila envelope on the chair next to me and pulled out another regular-sized envelope. Well, Megan, I've asked you to do this at least 10 times in the last 2 months, and each time you've refused to honor my request. I had no other choice, I warned her with a sigh. Megan, here are the divorce papers. I placed my hand on the large envelope. All you have to do is sign them and mail them. As you can see, they come with a stamped envelope with a return address. If you decide you need a lawyer to review the papers, please, that's your right. Megan stared at me for a moment, then stepped forward and hovered in front of me, resting her hands on the desk. You stupid son of a bitch, she growled angrily. You can't divorce me just because I don't want to quit my job or only hang out with friends you approve of. If you want a divorce, you have to have a good reason for it, and you don't have one. She pushed away from the table and stepped back, sitting back in her chair and leaning back. The look in her eyes was cold and hard. The straightened back and arms crossed over her chest also signaled that my stubborn wife was not going to compromise. I think it's time for you to come home and get a grip, she continued. I'm your wife, and I'm not going to leave my home and family just because you don't like where and with whom I work. Well, then it was time to counterattack. Megan, why did you come to visit your sister this week? I asked in an even voice. What a witty question. She snickered. You know why? We discussed it before I came here. It was a lie, and you know it, I said in the same measured way. So what was the real reason? Come on, tell me, since you're such an all-knowing son of a bitch, the liar sneered again. Megan, why did you and Nancy go to Planned Parenthood on Wednesday? Looking her in the eye, I laid out my first trump card. The kitchen was suddenly very quiet. My favorite wife seemed to shrink a little and began squirming slightly in her chair. Some of her bravado seemed to be gone, too. I don't know what you're talking about, she mumbled a few tones lower. I leaned over the table, bringing my face close to hers, and asked in a quiet, grim tone, For what purpose did you pay Planned Parenthood $800 in cash? Bams! And here comes blow number 2, which seems to have resulted in a bit of a knockdown, for there was no response at all from the other side of the table this time. Megan seemed to be looking in my direction, but her gaze seemed to be fixed anywhere but on me. It was obvious that she was feeling quite uncomfortable right now. I could even hear her swallow, as if she had something unpleasant tasting stuck in her mouth. So why did you have an appointment at Planned Parenthood for 11 in the morning? What exactly were they going to do for you for the $800 you paid them? I continued to press Megan, giving her no time to breathe and make up new lies. God damn it, stop bugging me about something you have no idea about. None of your damn business why I was there or what I was doing. The wife's anger flared up, causing her to raise her voice. Megan, Planned Parenthood does abortions. I countered her attacks with my knowledge. You know it, I know it, and everyone in this town knows it. And since I gelded myself for your convenience a long time ago, why on earth would you want an abortion? I don't think your surgery went as well as you think it did, she said. Maybe you should get yourself checked out. In response, I pulled out another envelope waiting for my turn. Here are 3 lab reports. 2 months ago, 1 month ago, and last week. I only shoot blanks in bed, and I have all the paperwork to prove it. Now, Megan, you want to show me the Planned Parenthood report that says you're not pregnant? You son of a bitch, she snapped, unwilling to give up even in the face of the obvious and undeniable facts. But it still wasn't enough to justify a divorce. Why the hell don't you just admit that you've been messing around with Kirk Langford for the last 6 months and be done with it? We're both adults and we know what was really going on, and you continue to blatantly lie and twist. I couldn't take it anymore, and this time I snapped. Because you have no proof that I did anything with anyone but you. She cut me off. And anyway, I don't want to sit here a minute longer and listen to you rant about something that never happened. So you never had sex with Kirk Langford? I said no, she exploded. I'm your wife and I've only had sex with you. Then how the hell did you get pregnant? Did the Holy Spirit descend upon our sinful earth for the first time since Jesus and bring about the second immaculate conception? There was a heavy silence between us. A nervous Megan bit down hard on her lower lip, her eyebrows pulled together, and an anxious crease appeared on her tense forehead. There was no way she could answer that question without incriminating herself. I pulled a stack of photos out of my trusty manila envelope. 6 colorful photos of Megan with Kirk appeared on the table. Her face was pale now. Did you sleep with him? I asked a new question. There was no answer. So I laid out on the table a solitaire of 6 more pictures of them making friends with their bodies in different positions. When I put another stack of pictures on the table, she couldn't take it anymore and started yelling at me. Stop it, goddammit, enough! Okay. I see you've been spying on me, Megan snorted with venom in her voice. I would have thought she would break down and be ashamed of her betrayal, but no such luck. I was the main accused again. You're a sneaky son of a bitch, you know that? She attacked me angrily. If you knew something was going on, why didn't you just stop it like a real man? No, all you do is snoop around and take pictures like, like some dirty pervert. I'm sick of your pathetic whining. Just then, my cell phone rang and I picked it up off the table. Dad, hi. Okay, 10 minutes will be just fine. Thanks for calling. As soon as I disconnected, she immediately blurted out, "What's this all about?" "It means Dad's on his way to bring your stuff here to Nancy's. He should be here in about 10 minutes. By the way, our house has new locks. If we forgot to pack anything, just let me know and I'll pass it on to you." Megan's face turned into a frozen mask, and she stiffened in her chair, unable to utter a word. I pulled something else out of the same envelope. "Here's the papers on your car. I signed it over to you. Here, in this envelope, is half the money from our bank accounts, somewhere around $1,200. Pushing the envelope with all the papers to the other side of the table, I continued. "About the kids, here's my proposal. You'll have the right to see them once a week. Once a month, I'm willing to let you stay in the house overnight, provided you make a written statement about your relationship with Kirk Langford and have it notarized. Oh, I almost forgot." I put my thumb up. "I still have the DVD I didn't get a chance to show you. It's a tape of you and Kirk's visit to the Scandia Motel on May 10th. The video is 2 hours long, and it shows you two tumbling around and doing all the things in these pictures." Gathering all the pictures from the table into a stack and waving them in the air, I said, "Just so you know, I personally didn't take any of them. I really didn't care what you did with him. I just really don't like being made a fool of. One last thing. I'd like to leave you this souvenir, a memento of our former love." I took the English pin off my keychain and held it out to Megan across the table. "What? What the hell is that?" she mumbled, staring at the little object glistening in my palm like it was some kind of disgusting insect. "That, sweet wife, is the pin I've been poking little holes in all your condoms for the last 2 months. I wonder if you know that you've used 48 rubber bands in the last couple weeks alone? Apparently, old Kirk has been getting more sex from you than I ever dreamed possible. He's a fucking lucky man." "You pathetic little weasel," she shrieked. That's the most fucking disgusting thing I've ever heard of. You really are a filthy bastard." "No, honey, the most disgusting thing is sleeping with some asshole you're not married to. I may be a bastard, but you're the ultimate cheating whore." Outside the windows, I heard the sound of an approaching car. Rising from the table, I tossed the English pin that had played its part on top of the manila envelope with the documents and photo. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to run. I see Dad just pulled up to the house. By the way, in case you haven't noticed, you never apologized for what you did, and you never apologized once. I don't think you deserve to be my wife. Goodbye, Megan, and enjoy your abortion on Monday." When I finally walked out of the kitchen, the sounds of her sobbing came from back there. Nancy rushed out of the next room like a sow hen to comfort her sister, and Brad followed me out onto the porch. "What the hell are you doing, man?" he exclaimed, grabbing my arm. "You two have been married for 14 years. You can't throw that all away over some misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding? Brad, do you know the exact reason my wife came to visit you and Nancy?" I asked him sarcastically, carefully releasing my sleeve. He stared at his feet for a few seconds as if pondering. Then he looked up at me apologetically. "I'm sorry, Phil. Let me help you unload the truck." It took us about 10 minutes to unload the truck. Megan's wailing and sobbing had been going on and on from the kitchen the whole time. I didn't know what she was crying about, and frankly, I didn't care. Epilogue. Kirk and Megan were fired from Globus the following week. Megan refused to sign the affidavit. However, her lawyer said he had a strong enough case for trial without it. After leaving Nancy and Brad's house, I never heard from my loving wife again after that evening. She didn't even show up to visit the kids. They didn't seem to mind and didn't miss her much as they had developed a good bond with Janet. We spent a lot of time together, basically as one big sociable family. During this period, Janet and I didn't have sex or even talk about it. We weren't going to do anything that would jeopardize both of our divorces. The kids and I learned a lot about Coy and had a great time watching them. Finally, 4 months later, Both divorces were officially finalized. Megan never fought the inevitable, but Kirk went down, kicking and screaming loudly. He lost his house, all of his monetary investments, and was eventually forced to pay large monthly alimony payments. A few days before Christmas, Megan did show up on our doorstep with gifts for the kids. I was polite to her and didn't do anything to spoil everyone's holiday cheer. She stayed with us for about 2 hours and then left as quietly as she had come. During that time, not a word was said between us about the divorce or her affair. Shortly after New Year's, I put the house on the market, and 2 months later, the children and I moved in with Janet. Kirk, according to rumors I had heard, took a job in Omaha, and Megan went there with him. 4 months later, her lover disappeared, vanishing somewhere in the great American plains without telling her where he was going. Megan returned to Nancy after Brad left for Alaska, where he found a well-paying job on an oil pipeline. After a couple more months, Nancy received divorce papers in the mail. I'm sure these two sisters are great company for each other. Janet and I are very comfortable with each other. She adores the children, and they respond to her with their genuine affection. We are planning to get married in June and are preparing for our honeymoon every chance we get. We also remember the wise adage, life experience is the best teacher. He charges a lot, but he explains it clearly.